Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to TechGig Webinars, our endeavor to empower techies. The topic for today's webinar for code walkthrough is WCF Series as an SOA platform. We are delighted to have Sharda Prasad, consultant, with us today. Mr. Prasad has more than 15 years of experience in products development, technology analysis, IPR, and training in the software and IT sector. He specializes in SOA and distributing computing, SDLC, software patents lifecycle, and project management lifecycle for information technology projects. He has successfully managed project teams, superheaded corporate trainings, and ensured compliance to quality parameters during his 17 years of service to the industry and has worked extensively with international clients. Gentlemen, this presentation will continue for the next 45 minutes and we will take your questions after the presentation. In the meanwhile, you can post your queries through the chat pane available in the webinar software. Without further ado, I introduce to our guest speaker, Mr. Prasad.
Yeah. Hi, this is Sharda Prasad.
Mr. Prasad, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Keshav, am I able to? Hi.
You are audible. Please go ahead.
Hello.
Yeah, we can see the presentation and you are very much audible.
That's great. So, sorry folks, I was late precisely by 10 minutes. Sorry for that. My name is Sharda Prasad. I have around 17 years of experience in science and technology. My experience includes technology training, product development, technology analysis consulting in the field of information technology, computer science, physics, and intellectual property rights. I have masters in physics with electronics specialization, with masters of technology in computer science and diploma in intellectual property rights. What I will be covering in this session is SOA introduction, what is WCF, intro to WCF as SOA platform, why WCF, some reasons for using WCF, how WCF demo for creating, hosting, and calling WCF services. SOA introduction. SOA is an evolved programming model for business, service-oriented architecture, in fact, right? So this is the precise intro to evolution of programming. In 60s, high-level languages such as COBOL, Fortran evolved. Compilers were common tools for programming. Jump, go-to kind of statements were common in programs. The side effects of all these things, ripple effect in code that we used to call that problem, as code was highly coupled and least cohesive. Therefore, further evolution was needed. Then, the evolution in 70s, structured programming, like C, Pascal languages were evolved. Code reusability through functions was one of the breakthrough, but functions were tied to data. There were some problems that still remain. Still, code was coupled and not much cohesive. needed further evolution. In 80s, object orientation, that was a quantum shift from structured programming to object orientation. Languages C++, Smalltalk, Ada were very popular languages at that time. Abstraction and inheritance was the common achievement that particular model achieved. Code was less coupled and more cohesive. In fact, reusability was also better. But interoperability, integrations were still problems still there in object orientation. Then the evolution continued in 90s. Component-based programming model evolved, where we had libraries, static libraries, dynamic link libraries, DLL were common. COM and CORBA were the platform where we had component programming. Code was less coupled and highly cohesive, but interoperability was very, very complex. Then there was still a scope for a broad evolution. So in 2000 onwards, the web services were very, very common, and that was the start of service orientation. XML and SOAP were common protocols for message or data exchange, right? So the most known issues like ripple effect, coupling, cohesion, integration, interoperations are solved in SOA, meaning service-oriented architecture. Service-oriented architectures is highly cohesive and least coupled code which is easily interoperable and discoverable. So in simple words, we can say service-oriented architecture is a business facilitator. It's not only a programming model, it's a business facilitator. Let's see how it facilitates the existing business. So SOA as a business facilitator, how? In service-oriented architecture, everything revolves around services, and services are loosely coupled code. So one of the breakthroughs, the coupling is now much loose, so we have more independent modules and services. Contracts, SOA services provides contracts. So through contract, we adhere to service level agreements. That was unlike in our previous models. Autonomy, control of business logic. The full control of business logic services encapsulates web services or any other kind of services. We have business logic, right? So that business logic has full control in SOA. Abstraction, definitely the services or web services, anything you call, hides business logic from service consumers. Reusability, we can divide business logic into reusable services. So of course the reusability is still maintained, and in fact it's improved. Statelessness, one of the objectives of the modern programming. That is the minimum retention of info specific to an activity, because the services are used and the information required by the consumer, right, that are not saved in fact. So it's independent of activity or the consumer action. Discoverability, self-described so that they can be found and assessed or accessed, right? This is one of the most important feature of the SOA. All the services are self-describable and they are accessed through some mechanism from consumer to the service provider side. So this discoverability is one of the achievement which SOA has as far as business facilitator, as a business facilitator as concerned. Right. So this is how we can say that service-oriented architecture is a business facilitator, or simply SOA is business. How the service-oriented architecture meets the computing challenges. Computing challenges, primarily processing power, compute, memory, storage, networking, communication, of course, energy, power, environment, pollution, business, material, humanity, social aspects. All these aspects are computing challenges. Right? So let us talk about the compute, how SOA solves this problem. Right? So there is a term called cloud, which is most abusively used, and in fact that is nothing but it's the outcome of SOA, service-oriented architecture, where we have everything provided as a service, whether it is processor, the memory, or maybe the secondary storage memory, or you have some other types of memory, or whether it's networking infrastructure like bridges, your gateways, your backbones. All these things are provided as service, or simply in terms of cloud we call it infrastructure as a service. So we don't have to keep desktops or maybe big servers at small business or maybe mid-sized business locations. All these things can be shared or can be rented out. So that way, if somehow we can provide the compute storage networking as a service, it's an achievement, and that is what exactly this SOA has given. And we have a thing called virtualization. Through virtualization, we can have processor, we can have memory, we can have our network as service. Right? So this IaaS, that what we call basically as infrastructure as a service, is one of the outcome of service-oriented architecture, where most of the businesses now simply providing infrastructure. They are providing rack servers, they are providing big storage, they are providing good networking infrastructures, and the users of the consumers, they don't have to worry about their networking problem, storage problem, compute problem. They can simply have a kind of agreement with the infrastructure service provider, and they can use that infrastructure. Then it comes to the energy as a challenge in computing. Right? If the things are distributed, we have processors, storage distributed across the globe. Right? We have multiple CPUs, multiple desktop, multiple power supplies, maybe power backups. Right? So there is a simple calculation. 1 watt of processing power takes 30 watts of actual power. Reason? Because we have other infrastructure. Power backup, we have UPS, we have SMPS, we have monitor, we have some other peripherals which consumes power. Right? If we have that processor on the CPU as a service provided by some service provider, we can reduce the number of peripherals we require and power will be saved. So this is energy aspect which SOA means in fact. Environment. Pollution, that again, if we have multiple CPUs, multiple desktop, multiple servers running across and maybe utilized 1%, they consume power as well as produce CO2, carbon dioxide gas, which is the main cause of environmental pollution. So through SOA we can reduce the carbon footprint as well. Material business. Now what SOA gives to business? Businesses, whether it's small business or big business, they don't have to think about infrastructure, they don't have to think about platform, they don't have to think about softwares. What they have to concentrate on is simply the business, what they are giving, the application which they are giving, the business logic, the application which they are into, right? So that way definitely businesses, the material as a challenge is one of the achievement in SOA architecture. And the last but not the least, the humanity, how the humanity is related to the computing. Social networking or socializing is one of the achievement again, because the day is not far when people will have marriages online or on clouds, because we will have everything so close that we will have every kind of social gatherings on the cloud, and that is only through SOA, service-oriented architecture. So these are the few challenges, computing challenges, which SOA is definitely targeting, and SOA has definitely facilitated all these challenges. Some of the SOA platforms which are common, the few to name in fact, Microsoft SharePoint Portal, Microsoft Business Talk Server. These are the business applications that Microsoft has given. Smart SOA and WebSphere, that is what IBM gives. SAP NetWeaver Process Integration, it's SAP's SOA platform. Oracle Enterprise Service Bus, one of the Oracle's SOA platform. TIBCO Active Matrix Business Works, this is one of the TIBCO's SOA platform. Unify NXDay, this is Unify's SOA platform. Service Mix, Apache's SOA platform, and so on. There are n number of SOA platforms available in the market. So we will be focusing here on Microsoft platforms, and we've seen that SharePoint Portal, BizTalk, these are the platforms where we are using SOA. BizTalk or SharePoint Portal, these are the applications which will provide services to the consumers. Now how to program SharePoint Portal or BizTalk server, right? So as far as programming is concerned, we need some framework, right? So this WCF, which we call basically Windows Communication Foundation, this is nothing but Microsoft framework for building service-oriented applications, right? So simply we can say WCF is a framework for building distributed and interoperable applications on Microsoft platforms. WCF or Windows Communication Foundation unifies ASMX. These are the ASMX, Windows or Microsoft's web services, legacy web services we can say. Dotnet remoting, and enterprise services stack, where we have message queuing, we have COM plus, DCOM, etc. All these things are unified in a single programming model, and that is WCF. In WCF, protocol choices are configurable, messaging formats are configurable, process allocations are configurable, because we have code with configuration files which are in XML format. And this is one of the achievements, how we separate two things, configuration and the logic. Right? And this gives us how we can scale up and how we can scale out. Now, as far as the product development or application development is concerned, we have 2 points: scaling up the applications and scaling out the application. So WCF provides us both options. If we want to make changes while our application is running without stopping the application, we can make changes in configuration files, and that gets reflected in the application. We don't have to rebuild the application. Right? So this is one of the achievements, again, which SOA architecture gives through this WCF framework. WCF, it's pure service-oriented, built for service-oriented system design. WCF simplifies how you approach service-oriented architecture. WCF is loosely coupled. Everything is configurable. WCF is not bound to a particular protocol. It's not bound to a particular encoding algorithm. It is not bound to a particular hosting environment. It's different. WCF is interoperable. It supports core web services standard like web services start. Extensible. WCF is extensible to quickly adapt to new protocol and updates. WCF facilitates application integration. Integrates with earlier Microsoft stack like COM plus, DCOM, web services, MSNQ, etc. So integration is again a very, very easy task as far as WCF is concerned. So this is precisely what WCF is. Now, what is the motivation? Why we use WCF? Why not other framework? So why to use WCF is simple, because services are the core of service-oriented architecture. And Windows Communication Foundation is the easiest way to produce and consume services on Microsoft platform. By leveraging WCF, developer can focus on their application rather than on communication protocol. Definitely productivity will increase. WCF is a classic case of technology encapsulation and tooling. Developers are more productive if their tool encapsulates but not hide technological jobs wherever possible, and WCF combined with Visual Studio does exactly the same, and hence the productivity of the programmers, developers enhanced. So these are the simple reasons why we should use WCF. In fact, most of the programmers in current market are not socket programmers. They are not network programmers. Right? What WCF gives us basically abstract high level of abstraction of network programming, socket programming. So the developer or the programmer, they don't have to worry about how to open sockets, how to communicate between services, how to decide which protocol to use, what format to use and all. So everything is provided by WCF, and definitely that will improve the productivity of the developers, application programmers, or in fact anything we have related to product development. So these are the simple reasons and motivation to use Windows Communication Foundation. Now it comes how to use WCF and what all things are required to use WCF. WCF is part of Visual Studio. Now it is integrated with Visual Studio. If you have Visual Studio 2008, we can have WCF 3.0 and 3.5. Now if you have Visual Studio 2010, so we have WCF 4.0 available, which has a lot of new features in comparison to previous WCF versions 3.0 and 3.5. Because WCF is part of Dotnet, right? So we have things called side-by-side uses. If we have a business logic, legacy business logic, and now we have some improvement on it. So we can have two DLL of the same kind of business logic with different versions. So we can access both we can use both the DLLs with different versions. That is through Dotnet, and WCF is part of Dotnet. So that versioning is definitely one of the achievements through which we can use multiple DLLs. We can use legacy code, we can use previous versions of the applications. How to use WCF code walkthrough, that is precisely the session objective was. And we will talk about a simple business scenario here, as this is the basic introduction to WCF and SOA, right? So I hope that audience will not expect very high level of expertise as far as the code walkthrough is concerned. The code is very simple. There are some holes in code as well, right? So objective was simply making things simpler. Right? So I try to make things very, very simpler, right? And try to create one business scenario here. In this business scenario, we have some existing business logic. Let's say it's calculating TDS, right? And it has been happening for years. And we have a service in the form of, we have a business logic in the form of a class DL. Now, we want to use that legacy code or existing business logic. Plus, we want to add some more services or more facilities to that particular application. So what we will do in this code walkthrough, we will use that existing class DLL. We will wrap that existing DLL in a service-oriented application service. That would again be a class. We will add some more business logic to the SOA class, and let's say we add one more service that generates TDS service. Initially, the business was not generating TDS service. So for that, what we need to do, we will define service contracts for both methods. Once we have service contracts defined, we will implement the new method, which is generating TDS certificate, and for TDS calculation we will use our legacy method. Right? So we will use that reference in our SOA class, and we will use the existing DLL. Once we have the new service implemented, we will build the DLL of that SOA class. Once the DLL is ready, meaning our SOA service is ready to be used. So how to use that service where we have two functions, calculating TDS and generating TDS certificates. There may be multiple consumers for these services. So for that, what we need to do, we need to expose the services, right? So to expose the services, we need to run these services. So to run these services, we need a platform, and that thing we call basically hosting the services. To host WCF services, we have multiple choices. We can host WCF services using IIS. We can host WCF services using WAS. We can host WCF services using a console application, and we can simply host WCF services in Windows services. So here in this code walkthrough, we will use a console application where we will host the services we have created. When we talk about the service, it should have a contract, it should have some behavior, it should have binding, it should have addressing, it should have channels, it should have messaging, it should have formatting, security, etc. And all these things we will see step by step. In the current code walkthrough, most of the things are implicitly provided by WCF framework. Right? So few of the important aspects of WCF we will explore, and rest of the things I leave it for the next session in fact. So hosting as a console application, that is our code walkthrough exactly. And the last thing, once our service is hosted, it's running basically, then it is ready to be used. So if a service is ready to be used, we need consumers, the client which will use services. So use of services, what we need to discover the service, discovery to get the contract and configuration. That we will use add service reference. That is one of the way through which we can discover and we can get the contract and configuration from the service provider. There are other ways of doing this thing as well. We have one utility called Service Utility exe to discover the services. Again, this service utility will give us contract information and a configuration file. So it will give us a proxy through which we will contact the services provided by the service provider. Right? So in this code walkthrough, we will use first option, discovery, to get the contract and configuration using ASR, add service references. Metadata exchange should be enabled, right? So there would be some behavior also we talk about. So let us see the simple code first, and then we will see how it works. For this, I would require that you have Visual Studio 2010 running. maybe ultimate or professional, both will work. And we can have two solutions made, or we can have in one solution also both the service host and the service client. Preferably we will use two different solutions, and one solution we will have our existing business logic, a DLL, TDS calc DLL, then we will have a SOA service, that is again a class as a DLL, then we will have a host as a console application, and all these things will be in one solution. And another solution we will have a consumer that will consume the services provided by this SOA service. So here it comes, the code. This is our old business logic, a simple class. So we can have a class called TDS calc, which has got a method which simply takes one argument and returns 10% of the income. Right? This is normally happens with me, in fact. But most of the people, they deduct 10% of my check amount. Right? So there may be complex logic. So because this is the simplest code example I thought, right? We may have some complex business logic in this method. Right? So it depends business to business how they work. So this code is simply returning 10% of the income as TDS. So a class DLL is created. Now we will have another class, and that is what we call basically a SOA class. I have not used WCF services or WCF application here deliberately, because if we use existing WCF templates, a lot of things is added automatically and our learning is less. So we, in this session, we are doing things from the scratch basically. Now we are creating a service-oriented application class, and in that we have two interfaces, and interfaces are basically service contracts basically. TDS service that has got one method, and that is get TDS. So get TDS is one operation which we want to expose to the clients or consumer, right? So if we want that the contracts we have, the interfaces we have, and the methods in these interfaces are exposed by client, so we need to put these attributes, and these attributes are WCF attributes in spec basically. Operation contract, that attribute specifies that the method is used by consumers. Service contract, it says that this particular interface is a contract which will be accessed and discovered by the client, remote client. We have another service, that is TDS certificates generate service. So ITDS service is the interface for that service, and we have one method, get certificate, and that is again will be exposed to the client. So operation contract, that attribute is enabled. Now operation contract is the attributes for methods which decides whether the method is one way, it is duplex, or it is simplex, or it is response reply, right? So here because we have a response reply, so we by default it gives that response reply, so we are not mentioning any any value to that. So by default it is response reply. Right? So once we have our contract, we need to implement the methods given in the contract. So we have methods, two methods there, get TDS and get certificate. Now we will implement our first contract, first interface, and that is TDS service. TDS service, we have get TDS method, and that get TDS method, what we are doing here, we are simply using our legacy code, existing business logic, and that is through TDS calc class. So we created one object of TDS class, object TDS, and then through this object we are calling the methods available in that class. So method TDS calc is one of the legacy code business logic we are using that code in this SOA service. Second interface implementation, ITDS certificate generation service. So ITDS cert service interface is implemented as TDS service. It's a class, and we have simply implemented that method by returning a string, and that string here we can have a business complex logic which will from a database, the client. Then after adding all these implementation, we can compile this code, we can build a DLL, and once DLL is built, our SOA service is ready. Once that SOA service is ready, how to expose that SOA service, how to use it. If that service is to be used by desktop clients, we need to supply it through DLL. If it is to be exposed through web services or through websites, so it has to be hosted somewhere on web servers. Right? For this code walkthrough, what I have simply here is we are hosting this web service in a console application. When we need to use services provided by this class, the console application has to be running mode, So this console application is the simple way of hosting the services or SOA service we have created. Now the code is very simple here. We have two namespace here, system.serviceModel and system.serviceModel.description. So these are the two namespaces which are WCF specific. Through these namespaces, we will be able to access WCF specific classes. Right? And as WCF is a SOA framework, right? So all service-oriented application-related classes would be available there. So one of the class which we use for hosting SOA services is service host. So this service host will take two arguments here. The first argument would be the class of the service, and the second argument is the address where we want to host that particular service. Then as we have two services here, so I have two instances of the service host here. One is TDS Calc host and other is certificate host, cert host. So in cert host, we have that TDS cert service class, and the address I have used this for the sake of simplicity. I have used another address, and that is HTTP localhost 8080 SD. Right. This is just for making it different from the previous address. Once we have a service host instance created, we need to specify the endpoint. So this endpoint is the connection where the client will communicate with the services hosted by this application. Right? So now we have to add the service endpoint. Right? So as far as service endpoint is concerned, we have three basic things: A, B, C. A is for addressing, B is for binding, and C is for contract. Right? So here in this method, add service endpoint, the first argument talks about the contract, that is C part of the ABC. The second argument that talks about binding, and here it is basic HTTP binding. And the third thing is the address. So this address here, MEX would be appended to the host address of the service, and it will be the endpoint for that particular service. So HTTP localhost 8080/MEX. If we don't put MEX, if we put it blank, so it will take the base address, and that would be HTTP localhost 8080. Similarly, we have endpoint for second service, and that again we have different contract there, and that is certificate service, and we have basic HTTP binding, we have MEX, and that would be appended to HTTP localhost 8080/STSD/MEX. Once we have endpoints defined, then we have to define the behavior of the services. There are some attributes, something which we need to specify behavior. For example, to use the services provided by this class, the client will discover and will try to get some data about these classes, and that we call basically metadata. Right? So metadata exchange, that is one important point as far as service. So we need to add behavior class to STs. The metadata exchange through HTTP transport is true for both the classes, both the services. Right? Once that behavior is done,
Interrupting, your voice is breaking a lot.
We now consume at the client side. Yeah.
Breaking a lot. I mean, can you please check the audio? We're getting the feedback from participants as well.
Hello.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's better. We can continue.
Yeah, great. And in this console application, we will use or we will consume the services we have created and we have hosted using the console application. So let us see how the services are accessed, discovered, and then used. Right. So we'll come back to this client code. Let us see how the Visual Studio does all these things. So for that, we need Visual Studio. So we are hosting services, so it's better use Visual Studio as administrator. It will have better access to code. And now we see our legacy code, and we will see our right. So this is a simple application. We start from the legacy code, and that was our existing business logic. And we have simple method TDS cal, which is simply taking one argument, income as double, and then returning the TDS, 10% of the income, returning as double. Right. So this is our existing business logic. Now we want to enhance that business logic, add more methods, and create the classes as service oriented. Right. So for that, again, we have one class where we will add some contracts and we will use our business logic. So this is our SOA class, and in SOA class we have two interfaces, service contracts, ITDS service and ITDS certificate service. In both the interfaces we have one method each, get TDS and get certificate. So once these contracts are defined, we need to implement the methods defined in the contracts. Right. So this is the method which ITDS service gives us, and that is get TDS. So get TDS will return 10% of the income. Right. And now what we are doing here, we are simply calling our legacy code through this class object TDS, which is CTDS calc object, and that was our existing logic, business logic, legacy business logic, and we have used that method TDS calc, which returns 10% of the income as TDS. And this is our new service method, get certificate, takes string as one argument and returns string, right? And this is the argument which the consumer will pass, and then there would be complex logic for generating certificate, and we will have some good certificate generated. For simplicity, we have here simple string written by this get certificate method. Once this SOA class is implemented, our contracts are ready, then this SOA class is ready to be hosted so that consumer or client can use all these services, right? So what we need to do is hosting the SOA class, right? So as we've already said that we are using simple console application for hosting this SOA class, and here we have simple code, and we already talked about this code, right? So we have service host class used here, and through that we can define our service and the address, and we can define the binding endpoints of the services. Once we define the endpoints of the services, we can define the behavior of the services. Once behavior endpoints are defined, we can open the services. Once the services are open, they are ready to be consumed. Now, this service is ready to be consumed. Ready to be consumed meaning, let's see that what happens in our network. So we go to, right. So let's see what is the network state. Right. So this is the existing network state, and once we run the host, which is hosting our SOA services, so definitely there would be some more TCP connections. So now our service is running, right? So if we want to terminate this, we will press any key or we will press enter, so this service will terminate, right? So we have got this console application which is hosting the services running here. Now we can open another Visual Studio, and we can open the client here. Right. So we have options here. So first we will use single. Here we have client as well as so let us open the right. So here we have client, and this is our client, and we've already talked about this code, and let's see how it uses. So we have, these are the things, service references, and these two service certificate and TDS, these are the namespaces, or we can say alias, which are referencing to the services provided by our SOA services, right? So TDS and CERT are two service references. So we can see, in fact, that what all services are running there. So here we have, let's say, what is there at this address. Right, so let's say when we have this address, let's see how many services are running at this service. Go. Right. So we have a service. The certificate service is running at this. Right. We have one more address there, and that was 8080 simply. See what all services are running at this. Right. So we have, this is the base address, and both the services are available at this address. Right. So we can now have service references, and we can use the services provided by these SOA classes. Right. So this add service reference, this is the tool provided by Dotnet, Visual Studio, WCF, which generates proxy class, and similarly it generates some configurations for client through which client will be able to access the services hosted on a particular address. Right. So if this add service reference tool is not there, we will have to select some other utility like service util exe. So here, once we have these two references, so these two references will give us each and everything. So here you can introspect the classes using these references. Say, for example, here we have, now we have two services, so you can easily introspect this TDS cert service. It has got one operation, and that is get certificate. We have another service, that is TDS service, and this is the contract, and through this contract we have one operation, get TDS. Right. So this is what this add service reference gives us. Through this tool we can introspect, we can see what all methods are available in a particular service, what all services are available at one particular address, right? And then we can have service wants is TDS certificate, right? So this is the TDS certificate of Peter for year X, Y, Z. So this is how the communication is happening between this client and the server. So we can have more complex code. So this is the zero level code walkthrough as far as a simple SOA service, SOA service host, SOA service consumer are concerned. Right. So any questions?
Yeah, questions are already shared with
Would be
me.
great if you have any questions related to this code walkthrough.
Questions are already
Okay.
shared with you.
Yeah. Oh, so great question. What is meant by SOA maturity? Great question, in fact. I really don't know the answer of this question. Yeah. Any more question, please?
There are 3-4 questions that I shared with you. Can you expand the chat pane and see those questions?
Yeah, please share them. This is a good question. In fact, what is meant by SOA maturity? In fact, see, if I simply guess that any model, if we talk about maturity, so it's related to business and how the challenges related to business are met in that case. So we've already talked about the business challenges or computing challenges, right? And how SOA solves these challenges, right? So that probably talks about the SOA maturity. This session was more WCF, less SOA. Yeah, you can say that, but it was how WCF fits into SOA, in fact. So if that is the objective, I think you are right that way. And then it comes. This session was more WCF oriented. Was expecting some session on SOA design. That objective was basically simple code walkthrough and how WCF fits into SOA, right? So maybe we'll take this thing forward, and next time we'll see how SOA design are discussed. How many contracts in WCF? How many contracts in WCF and where we use them? Where we are. Here we use service. See, there are different types of great questions. There are different kind of contracts. Service contract, service contract, then we have data contract, then we have data contracts, then we have message contract, we have fault contracts, and of course we have operation contract. Right. So there are different types of contracts, right? So here we have talked about service contract and we have talked about operation contracts, right? So service contract simply maps class methods of the .NET class to Visual Services. It maps .NET classes to the port types. It maps .NET classes to operations, because what this WCF is providing here, it is providing us the networking model. If the service is running in this console application, it is hearing at one address basically. So we need a socket open for the is connected formatting, what type of messaging we have used there. So all these things are provided by these attributes, which are WCF attributes in fact. So the service contract, which maps class method of .NET to WCF Services, to port types, to operations, and then we have operation contract here, operation contract. If we want to make one method single way, right, so we can simply use that operation contract is one way true. If it is one way, so one way true will make it single way. If it is duplex, we'll use other parameters of that contract, that operation contract, right? So it's a great question.
I think
where we use service contract, right? So service contracts are used for the interfaces which we want to expose to the clients basically. Does that answer your question?
I think we are running out of time. There are a few more questions, but we can take them offline.
And then we have one more. Okay.
We can conclude the session now.
That's it? From my side, the walkthrough, the slides are over.
Conclude the session now.
Yeah, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, folks. Pardon?
Thanks, Mr. Prasad, for your informative session on WCF Services as a SOA platform. It was indeed an enlightening session.
You're welcome, Keshav.
I would also like to thank our participants for the support in making this webinar a huge success. The recording of this webinar will be available on techgeek.com by tomorrow. The next session in TechGeek webinars is happening tomorrow, that is 6th January at 5 p.m. Topic for tomorrow's webinar is Deep Packet Inspection (DPI) to tackle insatiable demand for additional bandwidth. We will be having Mr. Murli Iraguntala, Product Manager at HCL Technologies, as our guest speaker. So see you all tomorrow. Thank you.